This show is brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/Cameron Adair and get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial. There's almost 1 million titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, and music player. This show is also brought to you by Amazon. Click on the Amazon link in the show notes or on the podcast page of the website and do your normal shopping through that link. We get a portion of what you normally spend on Amazon when you shop through our Amazon link.
Dot bomb 1.0, as we all called it, and that was not a pretty thing to live through.
What do they call it? Multimedia Gulch?
Yeah, that was it, Multimedia Gulch. But it was the whole city. The fallout from that musically was really a push to indie folk and Americana. We're in, I think, one of the most interesting transition times we've been in since the vinyl record to the CD. It's a bigger, longer period, but this is a profound shift of formats.
Yeah.
The industry calls it the change of ownership to access. I mean, all streaming services normalize to a certain level. They all vary. No one can agree on what's what. Visibility is the big thing now. Like, how do you become visible to an audience? There's so many records being made, and so there's so much competition for your attention.
Everyone's an artist and a DJ and a photographer on their Instagram.
Right. And a mastering engineer. Everyone's a mastering engineer.
Are they?
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
Is there anything you do every time?
Yeah, I slam the shit out of it.
You slam the shit out of it? Okay.
I wish we didn't have to do that, but that's definitely every time.
Yeah.
This is the Cameron Adair podcast with me, Cameron. This is episode 14. Today on the show is Mike Wells. Mike's a mastering engineer. He opened Mike Wells Mastering 15 years ago in a room at High Street Studios in the San Francisco Tenderloin. He now runs Mike Wells Mastering out of North Hollywood. His credits include Green Day, Prince, Tommy Guerrero, Google, Apple, and many others. He served on the board for the Recording Academy and also as president of the LA chapter of AES. We talked about audio, music, and survival. Here's Mike.
We're here in North Hollywood at Mike Wells Mastering Studio, Friday afternoon. We met back when I was working at High Street, and you had your setup there on the first floor.
Yeah, I moved in there in 2003. I was at a private place before moving into High Street with the mastering studio. I started the mastering studio in 99, doing records for other clients. I was doing my own stuff before then, but doing work for other people in mastering, that started in 99. And then I moved into Hyde Street in 03.
So you were working in San Francisco, or you came out in another location?
Yeah, I moved to San Francisco in 88. I grew up in the Midwest in Kansas, and I moved in 88 to San Francisco for the thrash and speed and death metal scene, guitar player. And, that was a dream come true.
Yeah, I saw your telly. That's yours?
The telly's actually a friend of mine. He does custom guitar building, and I kind of help him tune him up when he finishes them. But I'm a Gibson guy, so I still have
me too.
and Flying V's and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah?
From the old days. Yeah, from the old metal days. Yeah.
You do setups?
I help him do setups. So I'm sort of the player that helps him and gives him feedback. But he does, they're all Telecasters that he does, but they're all custom chop shop, all that kind of stuff. But he's a good friend, and he builds these custom tellies, and then he sells them. So I'm just kind of help him out with the tuning, playing, feedback kind of side of things. Yeah, I had a lot of tools for doing, actual guitar work. My apartment burned down in 99, so I lost a lot of guitar work, and I lost a few guitars, all of my tools, all of my old training stuff. I used to teach guitar, the speed metal, speed picking, sweep picking, all that kind of shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was fun times.
Yeah, I like doing setups, and I taught myself how to do it through the Dan Erlewine.
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy, and you can get his books and get a little bit of tools. Basically for the price of a setup, you can teach yourself how to do it, and then do it, for free from then on.
Yeah, good point.
But it's a very delicate process. It's like,
for sure,
there's so much going on, and things are measured within, hundredths of an inch and stuff.
I studied under a guy named Chris Pyle in Wichita, Kansas. He had a guitar shop called Six String Fever, And so I worked, you could say. I just hung out with him. I wasn't getting paid, but I wanted to know. So he taught me how to do setups and all that kind of stuff.
I really enjoy
guitars.
it.
Yeah.
It's fun.
When we built the custom guitars, because I was in SF and he was in Kansas, so we would talk about how to do them. I was doing the paint jobs and the routing, and then I would send the guitar to him and he would do the neck and a bunch of, big, work, and then I would do the fine tuning when he sent it back to me. And it was fun, a lot of fun. I have this old 81 Flying V that was sort of my learning guitar, and it's quite a Frankenstein at this point because we modified it so much. It is a really fun guitar from the standpoint of how much work it's undergone.
Yeah.
But it's something to see for sure.
The pickups are like nailed in.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, Kahler made these Floyd Rose knockoffs for a little while, and you could put the whammy bar in a certain position and then it would turn the bridge into a fixed bridge. So you had either a floating bridge for the tremolo or a fixed bridge like a regular old fixed bridge on a guitar. And like I said, this is an 81 stock Gibson Flying V, so it just had a two-piece fixed bridge. So we routed this thing in to put this Kahler in there, and it's and then I have two other guitars with the same Kahler, but they discontinued them pretty quickly. I don't know why. I heard it was because of a lawsuit from Floyd Rose. I don't know if that's true, but I have three of those on three different guitars, and they're really cool just because you can turn them into two different bridges.
Yeah.
A fixed and a floating bridge.
But you had to route them in, and
like I said, we tore that thing to shreds. It's had so many mods on it.
Yeah, it'd be fun, I think, to have a guitar to be able to do that with. I want to get a beater.
Yeah, I got it. It was an 81 V. I got it in 84, and I got it for $150. Yeah, so it was a good one to just keep having fun with.
So he has a shop, or he has a
shop in his garage that he does all of the custom guitar work, and he also builds skateboards. He was a professional skateboarder, so he does custom skateboards, and then he's a guitar player, so he got into that, and he does both of those things. That's how he makes a living.
So how did you get into mastering? If you came to San Francisco and we're doing audio or doing music, I imagine you went from, I'm going to be in a band, I'm going to record bands, into the mastering end of things.
In a lot of ways, it was just where my interests lied and how I got there. As a young kid in the 80s, the 4-track was, the de facto recording mechanism back then. And I had a Fostex 160, cassette 4-track. I think I got it in 85 maybe. And I used that thing for, tracking my band's demos and stuff like that, and learning basic microphone techniques from the Sound Engineer's Handbook. Taught me a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Because in Kansas, I didn't really have any access to pro facilities, but I would learn about microphone types and placement and stuff like that from this book. And, just playing around with the stuff I could borrow from friends. Mainly it was SM57s and SM58s, just because that's what we could afford. And, just doing what we could through this 4-track and having a good time. And then moving out to SF, the bands I was in, we had more access to make, demos at studios. So I'm just hanging out with the engineers, just trying to learn as much as I can. And the majority of what I was learning was, guitar and miking, just because that's what I was doing. And then understanding more about drum miking. And this, you're kind of feeding into the early 90s when the triggering thing really started to happen with Randy Burns and Terry Date. And so that was a big part of stuff. And that led me into MIDI. So around that time, I was doing assistant engineering, and I was also doing some light mixing of my own. And I would never say I was a super proficient microphone guy, just because I kind of moved into the electronic realm. And I just got really swept away by the whole aspect of sequencing and how that stuff worked and getting computers to work. And this is in the early 90s, man. This stuff didn't work very well. So if you could get a rig to work, let alone, sync to a SMPTE time code, that was quite a feat. So I was in, I wouldn't say huge demand, but I was in demand because I could make those systems work.
Yeah.
And
that's what Matt Kelly was saying when I talked to him.
Yeah.
He was very excited to talk about syncing drum machines to tape.
Absolutely. From SMPTE, you had the ADAT come out, and then you had MTC.
Right.
So you could slave, MIDI to machine time code to ADATs, and then you could even get all of them going together. And again, if you could get that stuff working, man, that's powerful stuff. A lot of fine tuning to get these machines to work. I was building PCs, making that stuff work. There was the Macintosh, which of course has always been considered the music machine. But from an affordability standpoint, a lot of people wanted to work on a PC because it was definitely cheaper. So again, knowing how to make those machines work, I had some value. I did a lot of synthesizer work and real-time messages and all of the system exclusive work you're doing with SysX controller messages. And it's really technical stuff when you look back. When I look at plugins today and just how you can do everything in the box and you don't have to know any of the how to make it
like
work.
technical protocol.
And you don't need to,
A little bit.
But
not,
automation is built in. But, SysX controller messages and making that happen and keeping sync and timing going, that could be a real challenge. So creating a dynamic recording with synthesizers and drum machines and tape machines and ADATs and DATs, again, getting all that technology to work together was really an art form in and of itself.
And it's expensive too.
Very expensive and time intensive. And I got really into the industrial scene in the mid-90s. And so I did have a band that was together for 10 years called Gridlock, and we made about, I think, 5 or 6 full lengths and a ton of EPs. And it's interesting because that band's more popular now on YouTube than it was when it was in real time.
That's
but,
funny.
I guess that's how it goes. But yeah, Gridlock was a fun time. I created the band. I wrote all the music. It was a good time. I really liked it. Because of my interests in technology and synthesizers and all that stuff, I moved out of metal and really got into this technical side of things. I mean, industrial at the time was a very angry, aggressive, form of music. So in a way, it's a lot like metal in the sense that it's, it has a lot of power and aggressiveness and force to it. So in my opinion, it was very similar to metal in its form. It just wasn't guitars.
It's a slightly different scene.
Yeah.
Well, it's a different scene. But I recently got into Youth Code, which is a really, really great industrial punk band.
I'll have to check them out. Yeah.
And then I started listening to Ministry and all these
the old stuff.
The old stuff, like the original stuff.
Yeah.
Some of it's a little too over the top for me, but really liking Youth Code, which is a new band, it opens up doors to other stuff. Yeah.
Skinny Puppy was the band that just blew my mind. And it was 87 or 88 when Too Dark Bark came out, and it was a record that I heard and I couldn't understand.
I think that guy, he may have produced the newest, if I'm not mistaken, this Youth Code record that just came out.
Was it Reese Fulber?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reese was the keyboard player from Frontline Assembly, and he moved into production.
That's the guy. Yeah. My knowledge of this stuff is really very shallow, but
wonderful. I mean, Frontline Assembly, I'm a big fan. Tactical Neural Implant, all that good stuff, Hardwired from like the early 90s. And Vancouver, Canada scene was a big scene for industrial. That type, you had both Skinny Puppy and Frontline from there, and just great bands. But Skinny Puppy was their own thing. If you haven't heard them, Too Dark Park and Last Rites are really the 2 records to check out. The last 2 with Dwayne Gattel are just, those are records that will always stand on their own. You're never going to hear 2 records like those. So those were my biggest influences in that genre. But finishing up your question, just really getting into that aspect of things, and then mixing these really dense records and using newer technology like ADATs, getting everything to sync, doing live shows that have backing tracks with ADATs, again syncing to synthesizers, making all this stuff work in the moment. Then I started mixing for other bands in the genre. The biggest thing that really didn't make sense to me was mastering, and going to mastering sessions, as the engineer, bringing these mixes to a mastering studio. It was a very black box kind of situation.
Yeah. It's a dark art.
It was a little hostile. It's like, hey, can we talk about what's happening? And I wanted to kind of, have some input. And I don't mean telling anybody how to do their job, but more the vision of the record. Like, here's what I'm hearing, and this is the vision that I'm trying to reach. And people were not willing to entertain those conversations. And so, the funny ending of that story is, man, I was just pissed off. So I kind of entered this like, well, what's the big secret?
Yeah.
Why is this such a, thing that people won't talk about? So, I just kind of got into it from the standpoint of just, I got a blindfold and I'm in a room and I'm hacking away just trying to figure out what's going on. And this is also, we're talking 98. There was no YouTube. There were no books on mastering.
Yeah.
There were no courses. So it was really about listening to what I'm doing, listening to the products that I really like. How do I get from where I am to where they're going? And just trial and error. It's still trial and error, man. I mean, you never reach anywhere. I like to say about audio, it's all ride and no destination, because you're always getting better. And you have this vision about understanding a certain tool. But I find, like so many other people, you'll learn a technique, and as a result of learning that technique, you'll see another technique that you don't know how to do. And it's like, how do I get there? You're always on the path. You're never at the end. And that's one of the things that makes audio so fun. So around, 2002, I thought, this is really where I want to be. So, figuring out how to get some capital, which I got through loans, and I had good credit. So I got some loans from the bank and put together an analog rig and just moved into that area, got a commercial space at Hyde Street and started building the business. I still had another job and just trying to slowly build clients and make something happen. And it's just a long, slow path, but I've been on it ever since. And so here I am, still going.
How has things changed since you left San Francisco?
Well,
you kind of beat a lot of the madness as far as, I mean, you did. You missed it. Yeah.
I heard. Well, I was there for the first wave of madness.
Right.
I mean, dot bomb 1.0, as we all called it, meant, the dot bomb in 97.
Yeah.
That was not a pretty thing to live through.
What do they call it? Multimedia Gulch?
Yeah, that was it. Multimedia Gulch. But it was the whole city. And, I don't want to get on a negative spin because everyone's heard me say it, but I can definitely say San Francisco before 97 and San Francisco, from 98 onward is two different places. And, I made it there another 10 years, but I have heard since I left that it's really taken a hard turn in the technological direction. And the arts have, even taken a bigger dip than they did in 97.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Unquestionably.
Wow.
Too bad. I've said it before. Yeah. If you just stop and look and think about it, the amount of money that these tech companies have made is some of the biggest fortunes in history. So to drop it on a little town like that.
Yeah. And a town that's known for,
it's an eyesore.
Yeah. And just the whole focus of what San Francisco really used to stand for, I think has changed profoundly since 97, with the introduction of money and a money culture, away from, sort of a freaky people culture that I think it really was before. I mean, again, I'm 47, so, being a teenager in Kansas, in the early 80s, hearing about San Francisco, the only thing you heard was that was the freaky people town,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's the rich town.
Yeah. Culturally, it's people that are in it and not of it.
There you go.
And it just doesn't work.
There you go. Good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a really good way to put it. I'm really glad to be here in LA. I'm very grateful to be here. There's a lot of competition here, but at the same time, this is the audio home of the United States.
Yeah.
And there's so many people here. LA is a working city. I like to call it a destination city. You're here because you want to be here. I can't say LA is the prettiest place I've ever been, especially having lived in San Francisco, but the vibe here is, people are here for a reason. And they're here, for the entertainment industry. They're here for connections. They're here to make records and films and TV. There's a lot of vibrancy here. So the other thing from a career standpoint, I have to say hands down that I'm really happy about being in LA is, my roots are in rock and metal and heavy electronica. And, grunge really changed the landscape of San Francisco. And that's a long time ago. We're talking the early 90s. But metal pretty much shut down then when grunge kind of hit and kind of took over the country. But when the dot bomb hit in 97, the fallout from that musically was really a push to indie folk and Americana. And as a result of being in San Francisco, that was the main focus of my business as a mastering engineer was these acoustic, types of music. And I have to say from an engineering standpoint, it was a lot of fun because a lot of mastering is solving puzzles. You're trying to understand where you're at and where the artist wants to go. So in that respect, it was a lot of fun. But from a personal fulfillment standpoint of music that I really, truly love, I was pretty far away from that side of things. And now that I'm here, I'm doing a lot of rock and metal and punk, and, those are my roots. So I'm very glad and grateful to be here doing that. I have a really great client base from, what I've established in San Francisco, and those artists I know well, and I respect what they're doing. And because of what I learned in SF through those genres, I can appreciate those forms of music quite a bit. But, where is my original focus? It's in my roots.
Yeah.
Because, that's the music I grew up on.
What can you tell me about mastering? When I went through the process of doing my thing, I just gravitated towards Sterling because it just seemed like the obvious, or that, or Bernie Grundman or something. I was like, let's just do that because that seems like the obvious choice.
Legendary houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't know what to expect, especially since like fidelity is becoming arguably less and less important to a lot of people. And music is kind of just devalued. Recorded music in a lot of ways. Spending thousands of dollars to get your thing mastered by one of these legendary houses. When the option to do Lander is on the table, this can be just confusing. I'm confused,
Yeah, Lander. The automated mastering services are pretty interesting.
What is that?
I've tried them out, and I get what they're trying to do. And, for what it's worth, you get what you pay for. And that's my attitude anyway. And yes, the automated computer algorithms are always going to get better. There's no doubt about that. However, are you making art, or are you making a computer program?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think the connection that people have with one another, that's not going to change.
Yeah.
So, an automated computer algorithm is not discussing the vision of your record with you. And, that's my take on those kinds of things. But hey, you get what you pay for. But coming back to your question, with regard to, where we're at with the state of mastering and the state of fidelity, we're in, I think, one of the most interesting transition times we've been in since the vinyl record to the CD. It's a bigger, longer period, but this is a profound shift of formats.
Yeah.
Going from a physical format to a digital format, and changing, the resolution and file type that we've had, from a PCM file format to a lossy codec like an MP3.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Just the way that I think about music now is so much different because I can just pull out Spotify.
Yeah.
It's something completely different now. It's not like something that's so precious that's in my collection at home.
Ownership. The industry calls it the change of ownership to access. Because like you said, there was a lot of pride in your collection.
Yeah. And
building that collection and how you connected to that collection. So that's the concept of ownership. And now we're living in a time of access where, since we have access to everything, the feeling of ownership isn't present.
Right.
So the emotional connection to that is not really present. And you have a generation, and not only a generation, but all generations going forward, at least foreseeably for right now, where there is that shift of perspective. So how will people connect to music, and will we return to ownership, and does it matter? From a fidelity standpoint, because that's more of a human experience thing, but from a fidelity standpoint, I actually think we have good news going ahead. And that is the MQA format is coming out, and that's a high resolution streaming proposal. So we would be getting away from lossy codecs and getting into full resolution that can stream. It's a new standard that's being proposed. There's a lot of information going around about that. There is the whole LUFS concept that is, all streaming services normalize to a certain level of RMS. They all vary. No one can agree on what's what, which is, of course, pretty common. That being said, since we are moving to an exclusively streaming model, if everybody's normalizing to a certain level RMS-wise, that gives us the potential for dynamics.
Yeah.
So is it going to happen fast? I don't think so. But is it something we can grow towards? Very possibly. The distribution models will have to change. And again, ownership, I think, is the major thing that will have to change for this to actually happen. Because take the concept of you as an artist making a record.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be selling those songs through various, DMRs like Amazon MP3 and iTunes Music Store. So you want your songs to stack up commercially to other material.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's world, that means powerful, highly compressed, loud masters.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the streaming model, you could say, okay, great, we have more of an LUFS concept, which creates, a much larger dynamic range available to these assets as they stream. So conceptually, you could have two different assets, one that's for purchase and one that's for streaming.
You can get higher resolution through LUFS in a streaming service?
Well, no, not higher resolution, but higher dynamic range.
Dynamic range.
Wider dynamic range. So instead of like a -6, you could have a -18. You've got a lot of peak value. You can really get some punch and snap and all that good stuff, like the old days, as they like to say. But the challenge is, as long as we have, assets for ownership, we're always going to have the loudness situation, because that is a competing marketplace situation.
Right.
Until everything is strictly streaming, it isn't going to go away. That's my opinion. And then the second challenge to that is, who's going to pay for two sets of masters?
Yeah.
Like you said, in today's world where the return on that investment is so risky, are you going to pay a legendary mastering house $7,000 to make a compressed asset version and then another $7,000 to make an LUFS dynamic version? Yeah. Probably not, because you're not going to have the budget. So there's just so many questions right now and not a lot of answers.
Yeah.
But we're all hacking our way through the dark with a blindfold on, trying to find out what those answers are going to be. There's a lot of trial and error happening right now. A lot of people competing to be the winner. There's never a fucking winner. That's where we're at. We're in this weird transition of where we were, where we're going to, but who knows what that going to is and when we're going to get there.
Yeah.
To have something like the CD or the vinyl record,
yeah,
where we're all using
just
a common
something that's
format.
ubiquitous.
Yeah, and everybody agrees on it and we all use it.
Yeah, you see a lot of people taking these weird stabs, like how Kanye West redid the album. He said, no, never mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to re-release this a month later. Coincidentally, Tidal's free trial is a month long.
What a coincidence.
Yeah. That's just so ridiculous to see stuff like that happening. That's the people not knowing and just acting weird.
Yeah.
Just to try and, just because no one knows where it's going to go.
Yeah. A lot of attempts to power grab, a lot of attempts to money grab. What is it? Subscribership is a big deal now. Like, how many people are using your service? That's your value. It's everything but the quality of the music is being valued.
Our mutual friend Brian, he's really knowledgeable in music business, and he was talking the other night about how the PROs are going to start, they're changing around the way that they issue performing rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's not just going to be Sound Exchange, I guess, that does
Correct.
Streaming, but it's going to be the EMI and the ASCAP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is and then there's also some copyright law that's being proposed right now too. And Matt Kelly was talking about that. Brian showed me the actual proposal. It's like many pages.
Sure. I heard about it at the Music Biz conference a few weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they talked about all this PRO stuff too. Yeah. So again, huge changes about where we were and where we're going. And this stuff's going to take a while to flush out.
And right now it's like you see people that are able to like maintain the whole infrastructure of someone doing it independently under the radar. And on the other end of that is like a lot of stamped out artists. It's almost like the days of hair metal or something, where everything's just so blown out to the point where it's a cartoon.
Yeah.
Like artists like, I don't know, major label artists,
Yeah.
It's this weird...
Great comparison too. Well, pop has been pop for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it ain't going away.
But there's definitely like a polarization, like a stratification between the two right now.
Good way.
Where it's like not... There's times in music or in art or in culture where some of the best work is being made, and that's like the norm. Like the 70s are typically thought of as, the golden age of cinema, where the work that's being made is generally going to be valued as, I guess, maybe more culturally important or even better. I'd say that that's not necessarily the case right now. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it's access is like invisibility is the big thing now. Like, do people even know who you are? How do you become visible to an audience? There's so many records being made. And so there's so much competition for your attention. And I'm a latecomer to the whole streaming thing. I just got into it about a year ago, and Spotify and SoundCloud and all that. I was one of those crotchety old guys that was, it's all about high res. But now that I'm, deep in it, a year later, I have to say, I really do understand the value that people see there as far as music discovery and all that stuff goes. But at the same time, if I were a band, it's like, how would anyone ever find out about me? If I'm in my car and I've got a Spotify station playing, if I'm driving, when do I have a chance to pull up the phone and look at who's playing this song and just listening to it?
Yeah.
And then getting on the channel itself, how do you do that? In a way, you could say it's the same old argument. Like if it was 1983 and you're on a small record label, how are you getting your record noticed? Your record would have to make it to a store. So in a lot of ways, it's not any different. I guess the difference I would say now is that we've never had more access to music easily, and we've never had so much music.
Yeah.
So as a young band, I work with a lot of unsigned young bands that are fantastic. And I just think to myself, how are you ever going to get noticed?
Yeah.
And I say that because I was a young musician once, and did I have the experience to get my stuff noticed? Did I know how to go about making a marketing plan and all that stuff? No. So the tools required from a young band to even get noticed, well, that's a lot of tools besides playing an instrument.
Yeah. But then there's so many little niche markets now that can just even equal survival. Like
Good
little
point.
cassette labels.
Yeah.
All this
I'm doing
stuff.
a lot of that now. Yeah.
And it seems like since there's such a proliferation that you can kind of find your own little area to do your thing.
Well, that's
which
great
takes a
news.
shit ton of
Yeah.
work, but
Yeah. I didn't know about some of that stuff. That's awesome.
there's just so many people doing.
Yeah.
So many millennials who are just everyone's a fucking artist.
And a DJ.
Everyone's an artist and a DJ and a photographer on their
Right.
Instagram.
Right. And a mastering engineer. Everyone's a mastering engineer.
Are they?
Oh, hell yeah, dude. You got a computer and some plugins.
Yeah.
I do mastering. Sure.
I just got ML4000, the McDSP thing, and it's
Right on.
blowing my mind.
Right on.
I don't know what I'm doing with it.
That's one thing I've never played with since I've always been a PC guy. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's like it's a multi-band limiter,
Yeah.
expander, compressor.
I've always heard it's awesome. I've
Yeah.
never played with it. Yeah.
So we can talk technical stuff. I don't even know what spectral EQ is.
It's analyzing the fast forwarding or transient system. So you're just looking at the FFT and figuring out what you want to do with it. Comb filtering, some stuff like that. But it's you talking about that little box I made?
Yeah, because you mentioned that it's a parallel spectral EQ.
It was a Clairphonic, and a friend of mine, a tech here in LA, and I took it apart. As I was telling you, I really liked the concept of it, but it was just way too heavy-handed to use it in mastering. So I said, hey, can we take this concept and, build a box out of it? And, David took it apart, and David Kolka here in LA, Studio Electronics, took it apart, and we took a look at it for a couple of weeks. And, I said, here's all the things I'm going to do with it. So we tinkered around with it, and he said, I think we can actually do this with the box rather than make something from scratch. And so that's what we did. We just really did a lot of modifying to it. And you can take a look at the existing Clairphonic to see kind of what it does. But my box, as a result of all the changes, A, it's a hell of a lot more subtle. And B, it's really more of, ambience recovery and is what I would call it, not to use nothing like Bobcats' stuff, but just, kind of dealing with the space of a piece of music, a recording. And then the second aspect of the box would be you could consider it close to a harmonic enhancer, but without all of the digital artifacts. It's a much more subtle thing. And
which is usually odd harmonics.
And we're not doing that here, but
odd order, right?
Yeah,
isn't that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Generally when people say harmonic exciter.
It's odd or even, depending on how the modes are going,
Yeah.
for the actual exciter. If you look at something like Ozone's exciter, it's got all different kinds of modes, and it's how it's driving odd and even and how it's doing filtering. So, this is similar to that concept, but it's a lot smoother, and we're driving certain frequency ranges with it. So I really liked the Clairphonic idea, but again, for mastering, it was just, whoa, that that even at zero, I don't think you'd ever be able to use it in a mastering situation because it's so heavy-handed. But this little thing, the MUK2, as I call it, that's my model number.
Yeah.
The MUK2, it's cool. Obviously I don't use it on everything. Like I don't use a lot of stuff on everything. I think mastering has been misconstrued as using a lot of tools on a track. But, typically I'm not using more than 2 or 3 pieces of gear on a track. It's just about picking which pieces. One thing that I see a lot of in mastering today are, I would say, 2 approaches. There's the my sound, my thing approach, which I see a lot of. Guys with very small rigs and talking to them, hearing them talk, the perspective is, I do my thing. If you're hiring me for my thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the other camp, and I don't think either camp is good or bad. I just see these 2 camps. And the other camp, which I fall into, is my thing is the artist's thing. As a person who made a lot of records as a recording artist, we're kind of going back to why I got interested in mastering. If I'm talking to a mastering engineer and he has absolutely no interest in what my record is supposed to be and he's doing quote unquote my thing, that's not the right guy for me.
Yeah.
I want to work with someone who's interested in, well, okay, Mike, what is the vision of your record? What are you trying to achieve? And that's my thing. My thing is the artist's thing because it's not my record. It's the artist's record. One of the reasons why I have a lot of equipment is to handle the variety of stuff that's coming in and, from a genre and recording style perspective, and also what the artistic vision is of their record. I'm not going to use one compressor on everything. I'm not going to use one EQ on everything. But what the goal of the artist is, what their vision of their record is, will dictate which tools I'm using on any given song.
It seems like that approach can, an artist may not even know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that happens. And so from a process standpoint, how I do it anyway is we get a collection of songs that we're going to master, and we start with one. If they don't really have a vision, which, it happens all the time, then it's a conversation. And often there's references like, I like this record a lot. When I listen to it, I like the sound of it. I'm listening to their mix. I'm listening to this reference. It gives me a kind of a conceptual idea of where they want to go. And we'll try a couple of things and see how it plays. And that will uncover the vision in and of itself through that process. Yeah. And then again, that will help drive my decisions of where we're taking it from there to give them what they're looking for. But uncovering the vision of the destination, I would also say, is part of the mastering engineer's job. If you're doing it right, according to how I look at the process, this is a service industry. This is a service function. I don't have the Mike Wells sound. My job is for the artist to have their sound. So if I need to help them understand what that result is, I see that as part of my job.
Wow. Is there anything you do every time?
Yeah, I slam the shit out of it.
You slam the shit out
of it? Okay. I wish we didn't have to do that, but that's definitely every time.
Yeah.
Outside of that, no. No, there's definitely not something that happens every time. The closest thing I have to some device being on every track these days is the Dangerous Bax EQ. That thing is damn near on every song. It's an amazing box.
Do you generally just do the bump the highs and bump the lows?
I bump the air.
Okay.
And I'll use it as a DC filter.
It's like 10K and above.
Yeah, and theirs is at 12.
Okay.
10 hertz and below. So I'll use that, bottom end cut, to kind of deal with any, DC that's coming out of the playback, and softly doing it rather than doing it in the box. And then I'll use the very top point of the EQ and just move that up along with the high cut filter so that I can shape where the space is. That EQ is really cool for creating space up at the top end and like the image. It's typically last in my in the chain. The chain.
Because it's not
it
the
ain't
Mike
my
Wells
chain,
sound.
man. It ain't my chain. But the chain for the record, it is typically at the end. And I do use that box more often than not because, sonic space, width and depth and field, I mean, we're trying to achieve as much of it as we can in mastering. So that box is a great tool for doing just that.
I think to make a great product, you really just every piece of the way has to be good. Like the records that you really like the most are written well, recorded well, mixed right, mastered right.
Some of the parts.
I mean, that's just the magic formula, for all your favorite records.
Absolutely. It's fun. I mean, I do a lot of indie rock, and the recording style of experimental music and indie rock can be really fun, just from the standpoint of them not wanting to have like a super polished thing.
Yeah.
There's a band called The Most out of England that I work with and done a bunch of records for them, and they're doing like an old 60s Who kind of thing. Is kind of the band I would say they fall near for like a reference. And they nail it, as far as the vintage aspect of it goes. And you could say on one hand that it's not a high quality recording, but on the other hand, you could say it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because if they're nailing that vibe, wow, man.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Well, yeah, a lot of people are doing that. Tame Impala is one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Where everything's just like totally smashed through like a DBX 160.
Yeah.
Where there's like no high end.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was dubbed on a cassette or something weird, but then it's got that vibe to it at the same time. It works. It's not all about fidelity. It's just about like vibe.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or Mac DeMarco is the other one who does that and pulls it off. I can't pull it off. It's never been my thing. I don't smoke enough weed, I think.
It's probably a good thing. Yeah. I've done a bunch of records for Tommy Guerrero, who's kind of like a lounge,
oh, yeah. He's involved in the skate scene, too.
Yeah, he's a big skater. Yeah, has a clothing company. Yeah, wonderful guy.
I know him.
Yeah, we've done a lot of records together. And his new one, he did, he mixed it to cassette. And so I got the cassette transfers, and then we mastered it from there. And it's not turning it into lo-fi, but like you said, it definitely creates a vibe. To go the full distance, though, there's a couple guys I work with here in LA that, they are going for the, 100% radio, gloss, super production. And these are guys that have gotten, records into the charts and constantly getting better at what they're doing. But again, that skill is without question a skill in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
I get those mixes from these guys and it's like, wow. I mean, it's just straight up for the radio. And I'm doing the old school mastering technique, which is called sequencing.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything.
You don't have to touch it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, what am I doing to this?
Wow.
Half a dB of level changing. And, but that, again, artistically and what have you, that's some pretty serious skill. And if I were doing modern mastering, the only thing I'd be doing is screwing it up.
Yeah.
So it's like they've already hit the mark. Just QA it, QC it, deal with coding, file formats, sequencing, bam, it's done.
Yeah.
So it's, you're hitting on, I think, a great point, which is every record has its thing. If you're trying to apply a one-size-fits-all approach or signal path or philosophy, quote unquote, my thing, that's not the camp I fall into. But I certainly know some guys that are very successful doing that. And I know a lot of other guys like myself that are, looking at it this way, looking at it from the artist standpoint and not the engineering standpoint.
Do you ever go on contract? Is that a thing that happens?
You mean like a record label?
Yeah. Or is it always just work for hire?
It's always work for hire.
It is?
Yeah. I am doing work for production libraries for TV and film, and some of that's on, fixed price across a certain time frame, like a year or something based on amount of material coming through. And those are big production companies. So, and at the same time, there's also there's not a record function to it, meaning there are no conversations about the emotional impact of a half a dB at 2K.
Right.
There are no back and forths splitting hairs over a quarter of a dB on this frequency.
Yeah.
It's here's the music. This is for this film trailer. We need to get it done by Friday. Get it done.
Yeah.
So in those situations, they're trusting you for your abilities and your abilities to create the sonic result. They're also trusting your abilities to meet the deadline and all the functions.
Yeah.
So under those circumstances, yeah, I'm willing to work under contract because I know the type of situation I'm in. But when it comes to working with artists, that's a very wide range of how people are going to act and how they emotionally connect with the process and how they like to work with an engineer. That can vary quite a bit, from the standpoint of like, yeah, man, it sounds great, to really doing some exploratory surgery, at a deep level of very fine-tuned moves that they're hearing.
Yeah. Would you say work-wise, just as far as the industry and the amount of people that do what you do out here since your move a few years ago, is it any harder or any easier as far as, owning your own business, or different?
It's different. One of the most interesting things about moving to LA was the cost of living in LA is much less than San Francisco. And that's, at the current time frame. And that's obviously, very obvious because of the tech situation. By contrast, the studio rental world is far more expensive in Los Angeles than it is in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it ends up being the same amount of money.
Yeah.
You're paying more money to lease a studio and less for a residential place to live, which is the inverse up in the Bay Area. So I have found it actually amounts to the same amount of money. So that's kind of funny. I was looking forward to lower cost of living here, which I have, but the studio world's much more expensive. But when you add business to it, there's more opportunity here and there's more competition. And the competition here is anywhere from, small names to a lot of really big names. I've only seen it as positives, actually, because my first 3 years here was a lot of struggle. You're moving a service business, and a lot of your clients are regional. So when you leave that region, how many of those clients are going to stay with you?
Right.
And how fast can you make up the shortfall for whoever leaves? And you're under the gun time frame wise because, you got to pay the bills, man.
Yeah.
And so my first 3 years here were really tough. I budgeted for the worst. And when I got here, the worst was twice as worse as I thought it was going to be. And I'm not talking about number of clients coming in. It is just, situations that happened. And so I lost my first studio that I moved in here, not because of a personal problem, but it was a bait and switch. It wasn't the level of studio that I was told it was. So I had to leave and find another space, and that space I'm in now. But lots of really challenging things happened, especially the first year. And then the 2 years after that was basically kind of rebuilding everything that went wrong. So I think anyone who's thinking about moving a studio.
You say it wasn't the level that you were expecting, what does that mean?
You mean of things going wrong?
With the initial studio that you moved into?
Well, at this time, if we go back a number of years before I moved, I was looking for a space long before I moved to LA. And I spent about a year planning the move, about a year and a half planning it out, because it's a big move, this is how I make a living. So I started looking at people that I could potentially rent a place from. I was working with Ellis Sorkin, who's here in LA, Studio Referral Services, and he is the broker here in Los Angeles. Great guy. His whole business is placing people at studios. And I ended up finding a guy on my own who was building some rooms. So I put some money into a room that was being built. And when I got here, it wasn't what I paid for. And the situation wasn't what I was told. And, to put it simply, man, I got scammed.
Yeah.
So I lost that money. I'm down here. I don't have a room. And so it's really scary. It's like, now what do I do? And I don't know anyone. I just got here. And so that first year was really, you know, kind of disaster recovery and management and working out of another guy's place. And all my stuff is in storage at a public storage facility.
Yeah.
And just scary stuff, you know. And so the, you know, the rest of that year was, how do I make money to make another move within the city of Los Angeles after I just lost all this money? So that, you know, really turned into quite a challenge, but I made it through that, got this place. Now I'm dealing with overhead that was more than what I thought it would be. And, you know, this is unexpected stuff, but at the same time, I mean, you never know what you're getting into till you go there. But, you know, I survived. I think that is another, you know, telling sign of someone in this business. I call this the passion industry, because if you want to have fun doing audio, man, good luck. If you're rich, you can do it.
Yeah.
But if you're not rich, this is the passion industry, meaning you're going to do it because you don't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
And you survive and you find a way to keep going. And that's what I did. So here it is, you know, 3 years later after that, and now the business is growing. I've had an assistant working for me for about a month and a half. I just hired a young woman to help me out with all the admin stuff here at the studio. So we're growing.
Cool.
You know, it's awesome. I've landed a couple of really big clients, you know, in the production music world, and it's fantastic, you know. So it helps you feel like all the effort was worthwhile and the pain and suffering and the money lost. But it's just like so many people, you know, moving to LA or moving to Nashville, the two big studio scenes in the United States.
Yeah.
Those are dreams. You know, and you want to pursue your dreams. You want to see this stuff happen. So it's big risk. You're taking big risk, but if you can get through it, get what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Survival counts for a lot. Yes. Especially in this business. Yeah.
Moving out of my apartment in San Francisco was a huge change for me because I was just dug in so deep there for 8 years in the same place through my whole 20s.
And you got rent control there, right?
And I was
you were
rent
there for
control.
so long. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I stepped out the door, the options just contracted.
That's a tough place to make any kind of move because the money changes so drastically. Here, you know, you just know that all the studios are expensive, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
You know, the apartments are cheap and the studios are expensive. It's pretty easy here, yeah.
You know, it's
There's
more
a lot of
expensive
demand
because
here.
there's more industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of demand here.
There's more demand. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. There's a lot of supply, but there's a lot of demand. So, and here's the thing I like about LA the most. People are interested in results. I have to say, you know, and there are two things: artistic results and, you know, production results. And by production, I mean, can you meet deadlines? Are you a professional? And then on the artistic side, can you deliver the quality of the product that we want? That, the intensity of that here in Los Angeles, I never found that in San Francisco. You know, it's a more relaxed situation.
Yeah.
It's a lot more, you know, it's a relaxed vibe. It's touchy-feely. There's not a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of personal projects. That was different in the 80s, in the early 90s, when there was a huge focus of the music industry there. But when that all left in 97, it turned into more of a, you know, people are having a good time making records when there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're doing it for a living, you're interested in, you know, doing work, getting it done, moving on to the next one, building relationships, building your business. That is down here.
That's kind of what I always am longing for.
Yeah.
Just to be in a situation where, I mean, before it was always motivated by myself to get the work done. I need to make a record before I'm 20, you know, whatever. Just to be able to have a situation where someone's saying, like, you need to get this done by this day. And I'm like, I know, this is what I want to do. Thank you.
Yeah. And they're saying they need it by Friday, and you deliver it Friday, and they call you back.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They don't call you back 3 weeks later and say, I just got around to listening to it.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's still art, and it's still, you know, creative work, but it's work.
Yeah. The amount of time you probably spent sitting in that chair, you know.
Oh, I live in that chair, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all know that from studio life. You get to Studio 10, you know, you never know what time of day it is. What day of the week it is. You know, it's work, revisions, everything. You know, it's, you know, being being a solo guy in this industry is tough these days with, trying to keep up with social media and getting out and meeting people, doing the work, all that good stuff. It's a lot of work.
So who else is in this building? How long have you been in this building?
I've been in this building 3 years now. I'm in an old studio called King Sound.
Uh-huh.
It was built in the early 80s by a gentleman named Eddie King. And he went to high school with Bruce Hornsby. So I don't know if you know who Bruce Hornsby is.
I know the name.
He had a big hit in the 80s. The Way It Is was the name of the song, the piano vocal song.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You've heard that song.
Flipped by Tupac.
Why does that not surprise me?
Yeah.
But that was all of Bruce's
I know Bruce,
records.
piano player.
Yeah. So he recorded his records here. This place had its heyday in the 80s. Police, some other big guys recorded here. Then Eddie sold it to a film and TV production company in the early 90s called Megatrax. And those guys are still here, and they own the studio to do their own film and TV compositions. So they have a full-service recording studio with full-time engineers. They bring in like the LA Philharmonic. Vinnie Colaiuta was here not too long ago doing a drum library. So they do a lot of really high-profile production music work. And they had a mastering room that Eddie built back in the day, and they weren't using it.
Uh-huh.
So when I was looking for a new place, I found it through Ellis Sorkin. He helped me find this place, and this room was just, it was decommissioned because they didn't have an in-house mastering engineer. And so I found it through him, and they had never had a tenant before. So it was actually great that I was at Hyde Street for so long because I could demonstrate to them that I had a very, long-term history with, running a business in an existing recording studio.
Mm.
And so they, let me come in and rent, and we've hit it off as far as people go. So I lease their only available room in here. They have their studio, they're doing their thing. And I'm up in North Hollywood. I mean, this is a fantastic place, man. I'm going to finish in my career in this room. Yeah,
that's great.
I love this place. It's a fantastic room. It's a great place, great people. It's everything I really wanted to have when I moved to LA. So I feel very lucky and grateful to be here.
I know that a lot of the bigger studios are up here in the Valley.
Yeah, the Valley's studio town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Larrabee's up here. There's a lot of places I want to check out. I was working at Prairie Sun
Oh, yeah.
in, I guess, March.
Right on. I
That
did
place
work
is
there in
rad.
the early 90s.
You did?
Yeah, in Different Fur, I did a few records there in like 91,
Yeah, you
92.
mentioned that, yeah.
It's a really cool old place.
Both great studios. I really like Prairie Sun a lot.
Yeah,
I was there every day for like a month.
it's a great place.
It's cool. Did you want to plug anything or do any shout outs? Sometimes we do shout outs.
I always want to give a shout out to my good buddies at Dangerous Music. I had the privilege of meeting them. I want to say it was in 2005 when the mastering console was launched. And I met Bob and Chris Muth at the AES show, and that was really a dream come true to meet Chris Muth because I was so familiar with his custom consoles out at Sterling. And here he comes out with a commercial console that is, one of his, solo designs, but you can buy it. And it was affordable, as compared to one of his, one-offs. And so I've just, really became good friends with those guys over the years, and I feel very fortunate and grateful to have become such good friends with them. So I always plug their gear as often as I can because their stuff is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
My studio is the LA showroom for Dangerous Music equipment. So if anyone's in LA and they want to get a personal demo of any of the mixing and mastering tools, I've got them all here in the studio because I'm now doing a lot of stem mastering. And so I have their 8-channel converter, the new 2-bus plus, and of course all the mastering gear. So if you're ever in LA and you want to check out some Dangerous gear and have a personal demo, bring your mix. We can sit down and play around with it for a little while and you can hear their gear because it really is fantastic. And I always enjoy giving those guys a plug because they're such good friends and they're really good people and they make great gear.
How long have you been working with them? Because I remember you had that stuff back at High Street.
Yeah.
The same.
I bought the console when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the first, I think, less than a dozen people that bought it because, like I said, I had made my own console, called it Frankenstein. This was a console I built out of a few other pieces and then just kind of making it happen. But, the thought of having an actual pro mastering console, that was such a dream. And then when they came out with this thing, it was like, man, are you kidding? And then they've been kind enough to place a couple of pieces so I could, help show them off to people that want to see the showroom. So right now I do have the converters, and I have the 2-Bus Plus that I use for stems. So if you'd like to, come by and see, like a stem mastering process and see how that works, it's great for those kinds of concepts. And stem mastering is really becoming a thing these days. And I certainly do promote it because I think it's still a great way to leverage analog, and it's a great way to get more definition and detail out of a master as opposed to a stereo mix. So I just see that as an emerging market. And yeah.
And they have their logo is Giants colors, black and orange.
Yeah.
So that's a plus.
There you go. There you go.
Cool.
Right on.
Thanks for doing this.
Hey,
is there anything else you want to add? I mean,
I just want to say thanks so much for, having me on your podcast show, man. It's great to see you, man, for sure.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. I'm having a good time. Went out last night. I've never really gone out in LA before.
LA's huge, man. You
yeah.
can do a new thing every day for years on end.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place.
I'm going to a movie premiere tonight, which should be fun.
Fantastic.
I don't want to drive back next week.
There you go. Right on. Thanks,
Mike.
You've been listening to the Cameron Adair podcast made by me. Thanks to Mike. You can find him at MikeWellsMastering.com and across social media. This show is available on iTunes. It's at CameronAdair.com/podcast. Thanks for listening. Bye.